in Toronto, in Vancouver, the big cities in Canada where there is no houses for everybody, they're all sitting empty by foreign ownership. Yeah, there should be a ban there forever. Hello, everybody. We're talking about the foreign ban that is happening for homes in the GTA where I am, or all over Canada where this ban is in place. Should it be permanent? I'm going to let you look at some of the information of the day, and I want to know from you if you agree with this ban or not. Now, let's jump straight into the article where they're talking about it at CIBC today. He is saying the damage is real. This is coming from the Financial Post. The damage is real. Foreign homebuyer ban causing upheaval in the real estate industry. Now, notice this is CIBC that is talking about this. Remember, I always talk about knowing the source, because before you even read the article, the source is going to tell you which way they're going to lean. Already, I know that they don't want the ban because they want more loans. That's how the banks make their money. They want more loans going out there. So you have to understand the bias, where it's coming from right away. Now, let's jump into the article. The ban, which blocks non-Canadians from buying residential property directly or indirectly for 2 years, came into effect on January 1st. We did a video back on this a few months ago. Now, the prohibition of the purchase of residential property by non-Canadians Act. Okay, that's a mouthful, but they're not allowed to buy property for 2 years. That is what the law says. Now, the reason why they did that is we are having a massive cost of living crisis in Canada and a massive housing crisis that is the majority government made. A lot of this stems from policies, unfortunately, and some people have to take a lot of responsibility for that over the times, right? So just think, number one, a city of Montreal. Most people have heard of the city of Montreal, especially people in the northeastern part of the United States. Remember, age of drinking is 21 down in New York. So where I grew up in Montreal, everyone would drive an hour, a couple hours north, and they could start drinking at 18 years old. So when I grew up, all of these Americans were coming across the border. So Montreal city is 1 million people. If you have the greater Montreal region, all the exteriors, it's another million. But like just downtown, 1 million. And it's one of Canada's major cities. Okay, 1 million people. Now just think about the amount of concrete and bricks and houses, hospitals, highways that have to be built for 1 million people. We're talking a lot, right? And the government is bringing in 500,000 people per year on the books and hundreds of thousands of illegals every single year. Now, think of the amount of building that has to take place for that to house all of these people. And it's not being done. It's never done. There is no new highways being built. There's no new hospitals being built. There's nothing being built. We build 250,000 homes anyway, but we're always behind. So if you don't build up all the services and infrastructure, you can see that massive strain is coming. So a lot of it is government policy driven. And this isn't left or right, whatever government. This is all governments are always doing the same thing. Now, let's go into this article a little bit more. Corporations are considered non-Canadian under the Act if they have foreign ownership of at least 3%. You guys, this should be pretty easy to understand, right? A corporation has to be 100% Canadian in order to purchase properties, So our companies that own properties, they have to be 100% Canadian. So that makes sense. For example, companies with a minority non-Canadian investor could be blocked from buying shares in a company that happens to reside in land zoned for mixed use or residential use. This comes from the problem that they can't buy homes, detached, semi-detached, or even land. So also, here it's saying GDP flatlines. Of course it flatlined, right? It's been really bad with those interest rates that have been hiking up. Residential properties captures detached, semi-detached, row houses, condominiums that fall into the category. So does land. Vacant land or developed land that doesn't house a habitable structure is zoned for residential mixed use. Could also be included in that definition. Okay, that's the same thing. Corporations are considered non-Canadian under the Act if they have foreign ownership of at least 3%. Yeah, that's what we had covered, right? So this is very important for everyone to know. The amount of people that are coming into Canada, we need housing. We need people to live in those homes. All of this stemmed back from like 1999 or something, when Hong Kong was given back from Britain to China. That system started this tsunami because at that moment you had a democracy, right? It was like the 12th largest place in the world at the time, biggest economy, that was now going into a communist dictatorship. So you have now millions of people with billions of dollars looking for a place to put it before they could lose it. So they were coming to Canada, I remember at the time, and they were buying property, land, houses from an airplane. They didn't even need to tour it. I'll take this whole point. I'll take these blocks. I'll take that whole subdivision. They were putting their money anywhere that they could. And this caused a massive rise in prices as they were dumping billions of dollars just trying to get it out of the control of China at the time. Now, as we go forward, this has been happening with Saudi Arabia, it's happening with China, Russia, all over the place, as they're coming to places like the Toronto region where I am, and they're just trying to dump their cash. They just want some kind of return. But here is how they can kind of wash their money. If they had $2 million, they can come to Canada, very easy to buy here, put $2 million on a property. Now they can go and borrow 80% of that property out. In some cases, they could get 90% out of a property. And now they can borrow that money and spend it how they want. Now they've cleaned up their money and they still have access to it. And it's not worth it for them in a place like Toronto or Vancouver to go rent it out because the rent to loan value is so low. It's not worth the headache for them. They just want a place to park their money because they have to be in a place that has rule of law. Remember, the rule of law is the number one thing that you need for private property rights. And that's why Canada is so in demand. Rule of law, and you could park your money here. This comes back to the government problems. The number one reason is policy. So let's continue on a little bit. I got a couple more slides to show you. Look at how old this story is. This story is from 2022, so it's a year old, but new data still has 1.3 million homes that are vacant. Now, estimates today, we are 1 million homes short in Canada right now for today's demand. Yet at the same time, we have 1 million homes empty, sitting empty. Now, just think of the math for a second. In Toronto, just let's say we'll use round numbers, $1 million. And the $1 million property is going up $100,000 every single year. But if you rent out $1 million home, you may only get $30,000 a year in rent. But that $30,000 a year, you know, have to pay half of it in taxes, and you have to pay property management on that property as well. Then you're probably going to have to pay some kind of power. You have insurance to pay on it. So that $30,000 quickly can disintegrate, depending on your tax structure, all the way down to 10 grand. And they're like, it's not worth my 1% a year to make that back with all the headache, all the phone calls, my toilet's broken, know that they destroyed the property or something. They'd rather not. They'd rather just buy the property, park their cash, and now they know that their money is safe. They've gotten it out of their country. And this has been happening for decades, which is why 1.3 million homes are empty. There has been a lot that's going on in Toronto, but if you're like someone like me who sells a lot of properties in this city, you can go into buildings and a lot of it's empty. Some buildings are 20% empty. A light never goes on. They're bought brand new off of plan. No one has ever lived in them. And so this is pretty common, you guys. So maybe you haven't seen this type of stuff in real life, but I'm telling you, it's out there. Now, to fight that, places like Toronto and Vancouver have come up with vacant home taxes. So they want you to pay 1% per year penalty if the property is not tenanted. So they want people in your property, or else you got to pay a penalty. But you have to self-declare this, okay? So you have to, like, considering that all these people in, let's say, a far-flung country is just going to magically want to get out a piece of paper and go, yes, sir, it's empty. I volunteer to pay some money. They're going to lie about it. Okay, but then you're going to say, well, they're probably going to check into this, right? They're going to send a zillion people after it. They got no money. The cities are broke. So even Toronto Council right now, in the past year, they just passed this last budget. They're $750 million short just this year. And you know they're going to go way over that. They always do. And now that interest rates are much, much higher, it's going to spike even higher because the city of Toronto already owes billions. The point is, they don't have the money to pay for the inspectors to go look at the properties. So this is something that looks very good on TV. It scores a lot of political points because they're saying, we're doing something about housing. We're going to block foreign ownership. It's not a huge, like massive ground shaking going to move everything. Listen, it happened in January. What you're seeing prices drop from January and February, it's interest rates. It's not the ban on foreign ownership. And why? Because a lot of foreign ownership would have to pay a penalty, a percentage as an extra tax for buying it from out of country. But the majority of people, Canada is a country of immigrants. Almost everyone in most of those countries has a cousin that lives here, in my experience. Everyone has a friend or a cousin here, and then give the money to them and and have them buy the property. So that doesn't really deter them very much. And the whole vacant home tax, though it looks good on TV, they don't make a lot of money off of it, and they don't have money to send anyone out to go check on it. The thing is that the houses are going to continue being empty for a very, very long time. In my opinion, there should always be a ban on homes unless the government says otherwise. And so let's take this into account. In Toronto, in Vancouver, the big cities in Canada where there is no houses for everybody, they're all sitting empty by foreign ownership. Yeah, there should be a ban there forever. But what happens if you had some real self-directed stuff? Listen, my grandfather came to Canada, and he came to Canada in a different time. He got off the boat in Montreal. When he got off the boat, he was told, "What is your name? We're giving you a new name. You're Canadian now." Okay, so they changed his last name. They told him exactly where he had to go. He had to go off into a far-flung middle of nowhere, freezing cold up north, and was given 4 acres of swampland to work on. No home, no checks, no nothing. He was dumped off in a swamp and had to make it. That's where my dad grew up. So that was really, really rough. They had to work for it, man. And so I'm thinking of another family of mine. This happened much after my grandfather. He was sent to a small little town in northern BC. At that time, they had to spend 10 years at that location. But guess what happened after 10 years? He raised his kids there. He opened a hotel, a couple restaurants. The guy is doing amazing now, and he's never left. So in any country, the country that is there, we have to split this. And I don't know how to get to it because we have to have freedom, number one, to do what we want. But number two, the government should be able to direct what we need. There are certain parts of Canada that are desperate for people to move to. Desperate. And they have provincial programs to allow people to move to that certain area. As soon as they get their citizenship, though, they immediately move out, and that place is continually just like a washing machine, people in, people out, nonstop. They can't get anyone to stay. So countries have to walk that fine line between allowing freedom to do what you want, but also having a price to pay. Like I can tell you, my friends, my family had to go through it. And there are places where we need workers. We need people to be living there. So I don't know how to bridge that. If you guys have some great ideas, let me know. That's for immigrants that are coming to the country. But number two is, how do we deal with this foreign buyer thing? So in my view, the reason why people come to Canada is because there's a lot of crappy countries out there and a lot of people doing dodgy stuff, right? They got to dump their money somewhere to feel safe. They always go to the country where there's rule of law, and they're going to do that by bringing it to Canada. They're going to continue to do that, bringing it to Canada. But we kind of allow it to get dumped into real estate, which pushes prices through the roof, whereas people that live in Canada can no longer even afford to live in Canada. That's a massive problem. So we have to create some other vehicle where people could dump money into Canada and invest into Canada without holding all of the housing supply as some kind of like hostage. We can't do that to the people that live and work here, right? So what could we do? Create a different Canada incentive bond program, foreign ownership, where we could use some money to build infrastructure here, make the country better? Like, what could we do? I'd love to know some ideas, but we have to have some federal place where they could dump money in to help Canada out, not just treasuries or bonds, but a different type of program where they can have a specific amount of yield and not just necessarily dump it into real estate, hold it hostage, and raise the prices on people who live here. We are getting into a massive problem in Canada. Think of where we live in the major cities. There was an article several years ago. Think of this. No emergency services can live within 2 hours of the city that they service. Let that sink in for a second. Policemen, firemen, customs, it doesn't matter if you're garbage collectors, power workers, anybody that you need to service that city, if they cannot afford to live within 2 hours of it, how on earth are they supposed to be there? You can never have a city of just millionaires. It doesn't work. It has never worked. It will never work. So we have to do something. Bring prices down. Wages got to go up. I don't know, right? But we can't allow this situation to continue. There's a lot of ideas that are on the table all the time, but we got to get our house in order before we can allow millions of people from overseas to buy properties here and hold them hostage. I hear it every single day for my entire career, how people are stretched so thin. Today, they say it takes 110% of an average salary to pay for your mortgage payment. Does that even make sense? 110%, more than 100% of your salary, 110% of your salary to make a mortgage payment. You tell me, guys. We have a lot of work to do, you guys. We're going to have a lot of problems coming up. We are at the beginning of the 2-year ban. So let's see if something actually happens. I don't think a lot's going to happen. I think inflation is going to continue for a while, but those 1.3 million homes that they're estimating that are empty, if they know there's 1.3 million, you and I both know there's at least 2 million, right? We could use those homes, you guys, for people who live and work here. Let me know what you think, you guys.